All right, joining us today is Josh Briggs, and there's a chance that he may not like me. But Josh, man, thanks for joining us today on the show. How's it going?
Oh, that's good. Thanks for having me, man. Yeah, chances are I don't like you or anyone else for that matter.
Definitely. Well, yeah, I've come to know you at Northeast Wrestling. I've
Yeah.
seen you the past few shows. You're a big dude.
Yeah.
I'm a big guy, but I mean, you're the guy who's doing aerial stuff at your height and whatnot that a lot of guys your size probably just can't do. But before we get too much into that, can you take us back and how you got into this crazy world of pro wrestling?
Yeah. So early on, I always loved wrestling. I had like a weird infatuation with it, and it just so happened that it kind of fell into my lap. I moved out to Massachusetts for a football scholarship, and lo and behold, Massachusetts is a huge breeding ground for professional wrestlers. And I stumbled upon Mike Hollow, who took over for Killer Kowalski and his old training school,
Mm-hmm.
and learned the basics from him. And Mike passed me on to the New England Pro Wrestling Academy with Brian Fury in Andover, Mass. And I just fell in love with it all over again for a different reason, really.
Mm-hmm. So tell me this. So you did play college football, is that correct? Did you always have that idea of like, hey, after I'm done with football, or I'm gonna do wrestling kind of a mentality?
So it's a little more complicated than that.
Mm-hmm.
I played football, played college football, Division I, and I hated it. I thought it was one of the worst experiences in my life. It just made me like really bitter towards football.
Mm-hmm.
And my junior year ended, and I decided I didn't want to play football anymore. And I really didn't think there was any amount of money that could be provided to me to make me want to play football. So I lost a bunch of weight. I was 315 pounds playing center at the University of Massachusetts. It's trimmed down from 315 to 285 my senior year. And I kind of stopped really focusing on football. And while I was playing football, I was more passionate for wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd instead of studying football, I'd be studying wrestling and watching wrestling and stuff, trying to transition and make the leap easier once I finished football. So I think it all really had to do with moving out to Massachusetts and having that fallback, that little safety net in pro wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
And once I realized I didn't want to play football anymore, it just made everything so much easier.
No, definitely. I think we had the same mentality of football because I kind of hated it in high school, and I was just done with it. I was like, I can't. I'm done with it. It was just, I think I reached a breaking point with it too, and I hear you. So, okay, tell me a little bit. You got into pro wrestling. You trained with Mike Hollow and Brian Fury. Now, were you always a fan of pro wrestling, or did you just get more into it later on to where you said you were studying it more? Were you always like a fan of it though?
Yeah, there's some pictures floating around on my social media somewhere. I think of me. I think it was my fifth or sixth birthday party. This is my first interconnection with pro wrestling. I got a bunch of professional wrestling action figures. They were all WCW action figures because that was the hot thing when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I fell in love with those action figures because they were so much cooler than all the other toys that I had, I think. And I wanted to see what corresponded with those toys. So I think my parents would put on wrestling for me. And I got to play with those action figures while I was watching the wrestlers on TV when I was 5, 6, and that was really the first my first like memories of pro wrestling, and that's kind of where I fell in love with it.
Sure. Now, I mentioned at the beginning, you're a tall guy. You're what, 6'7", I believe, or
yes, 6'7".
So you're just fucking tall. You're huge, man.
Right.
But like I was saying, you're a big guy, but you're doing stuff that a lot of other big guys aren't doing. And I think one guy I want to compare you to, who I've seen, who actually impressed me as well, was Donovan Dijak, who I've also read that you were a big fan of, and you also had a match with and worked with. Can you tell me a little bit about maybe your experience with Dijak in the ring? Because I mean, like I said, there's not too many big guys out there who are doing what you do in a way.
Yeah. So I don't know if this is really well known or not, but me and Dijak have a few different connections, and we both played football at the University of Massachusetts. And that was our first real bonding moment when we both found that out, and we both really disliked football. And we both trained at the same school under Brian Fury, and we have a lot of similarities. Like you said, a lot of people bring up the similarities in size and athleticism, but he was always a guy I wanted to have a big match with, and I got to really have a big like coming out party match for Limitless Wrestling up in Maine. Mm-hmm. And that match with me and him was about as perfect of a match as you can have at the time for me and my skill level. It was really fun being in there with someone who hits as hard as me and really brings that aggression out of you. And he was so much better than me, and he still is better than me, but so much better that it made me like a whole new level of good, if that makes sense. He brought everything out of me that I didn't know I had, and to showcase both of our athletic abilities at the same time in the same match was really neat for me.
No, for sure. And how long have you been in this world of pro wrestling? It's only been about a year or two, right? Not too long?
Yeah, 2 years and 2 months since I started training.
Wow. I mean, it moves fast, right? It's like it moves fast, you learn fast. But I mean, I got a question for you. You've been working on the indies, you've been working all over. As an independent wrestler, how does it feel for you? Because this is, and I call it the James Ellsworth syndrome, because, hear me out, to where, when they put James Ellsworth on WWE, it's like, well, there's a lot of things you could say, but it was like, well, why him? Why did he, why did he make it? But it seems only the last few years, not too much, probably even when you almost started training or joined wrestling, but it was almost like before that, you really had to go to their system, and then you had to work, work your way up, and, it was a long process. But nowadays, I feel like, it's anyone and everyone is up for grabs in a way. If they see you, they like you, they like your look or whatnot, you can, they want you, what I mean? It's a different world out there. But for you as a pro wrestler, how does that make you feel? Because I mean, you haven't been in it too long, but just knowing that fact that, hey man, you can get a call tomorrow and say, hey, we like you, we like the way you look, we like what you're doing, we want you to join us, kind of thing. How does that make you feel as a pro wrestler, knowing that the game has changed a little bit to where, anybody can really make it into the WWE or anywhere really, but I mean, just using them as the main example.
Yeah. So just to touch on that whole transition a little bit, when I first got in, I was under the impression that I was going straight to the WWE, because that's what they were looking for at the time, was tall, collegiate, non-wrestlers who had some type of athletic background. And I think like 4 or 5 months into my training, they switched what they were looking for from those homegrown, like bare bones type of guys to the names on the independents that can actually draw a lot of money from them. And the way that it worked out and the way it is right now, I love it. I think it's better. I'm blessed that I was able to become an independent wrestler, but I think it's awesome. I think that it just makes everything so much more accessible. Everyone can make money now on the independents, and once you do that, you can get called up and make even more money. It's great. I think it's a win-win for everyone, for the independent wrestling itself, for the guys getting taken up, and for the WWE themselves. I think there's no harm in it, and it's really neat.
No, definitely. And, you've worked with a lot of promotions, from Chaotic Wrestling, Beyond Wrestling. What I've known you for is Northeast Wrestling. If I could probably get your thoughts a little bit on Northeast Wrestling, because you've had a few shows with them already. What are your thoughts on just the fans there from Bethany, Connecticut, the little place in Bethany, to where it just seems like it's a lot bigger than what it really is, because those fans are just awesome. They love wrestling. That's their thing, you know what I mean? Like, that town is wrestling. But even just recently at WrestleFest 22, that kind of a crowd. I mean, they have great crowds, but what's your thought and takes on wrestling for Northeast Wrestling?
So in my personal opinion, I don't think there's much bigger crowds and like great wrestling quality fans than Northeast Wrestling. The crowd you were there for WrestleFest was unbelievable. People would kill to be able to perform in front of that crowd, and for Bethany too, the crowd's amazing. Like you said, they just love wrestling. They're into everything. It's a pleasure to work for Northeast Wrestling, and the fans are what really make it so much more special to perform in front of, and that's really what elevates a match to the next level, is the fans. And it's really fun to have a good match in front of those fans.
No, definitely. Now, you've been in the business for 2 years right now. Do you have kind of like a little bit of a bucket list, if you will, of guys you definitely want to meet anywhere in wrestling right now? Do you have maybe a little bit of a short list of guys you definitely want to, fight before, I don't know, anything else?
Yeah, I got a good list of guys. Matt Riddle's on there. David Starr's on there. Joey Janela's on there. Number one is my professional wrestling trainer, Brian Fury, but he's since retired. So I'm trying to slowly coerce him out of retirement. We'll see how that goes. But I mean, there's a lot of people that are on that list, and I've been able to knock a lot of the guys who used to be on my list off, and that's pretty cool.
Definitely. I like looking at people's Twitters, and I like to call people out on some tweets and kind of understand the full message behind it, because you're only allowed a certain amount of characters.
Yeah.
One tweet from you just a day ago, you have "The world is going to hell in a handbasket because we had the first two snowstorms less than a week apart in the middle of March, and now Kid Rock gets inducted to the WWE Hall of Fame before Fred Durst." You said you're done. Can you? Yeah. I mean, I think everybody is kind of like, it's a weird process for this Hall of Fame, because it's like you get, a legend, then you get the woman, then you get a tag team, then you get the guy who died or whatnot, and then it's just like Kid Rock, Drew Carey. It's kind of random, but maybe you want to explain a little bit about that, Fred Durst, that tweet?
Yeah, I mean, so I get it. I understand that there has to be that celebrity that for mainstream and all of that, but it's Limp Bizkit. I was at WrestleMania 19 where he performed, and The Undertaker's one of my favorites. I've taken a lot of Undertaker stuff, so it's no secret. But he played the Undertaker out and everything, and it just doesn't really, to me, in my eyes, make sense that Kid Rock has made it in and before Limp Bizkit. No offense to Kid Rock, because Kid Rock's great, I'm sure, but Limp Bizkit, I feel like, has just done so much more for the WWE.
No, for sure. I mean, that's what a lot of fans. There's a lot of people that are way before some of these other guys that are getting in, but. Yeah. I just wanted to read that out. But you mentioned The Undertaker. Is there anybody else that you may have modeled yourself after, taken some moves, or just kind of made your own person? Yeah.
So in wrestling, you just take what's old and make it new again, mm-hmm. and everyone admires someone, and they take a little something. So The Undertaker, first and foremost, was my guy that I did a lot of that from. Barry Windham's up there too. Not a lot of people would expect that or not, but Barry Windham was one of the most fluid big men of all time, and just such an amazing athlete for his size back in the day. One hell of a baby face. Kane is another guy that's up there for me. I really like watching Luke Harper and Brody Lee when he was on the Indies. Dijak is another guy that I took a lot of my idiosyncrasies from, the in between stuff that makes you who you are as a wrestler, and a couple other independent wrestlers like that. I just love Drew McIntyre now. Just big dudes who can move around and are athletic for their size is really what I was looking for. But Undertaker, Barry Windham, and Dijak are probably the top three for me. Sure,
definitely. And, one thing, too, I mentioned, too, there's like a lack of big guys, if you will. I mean, mainstream today, you got like a Braun Strowman. But this year, I mean, I think Big Show has wrestled his last match. Kane's pretty much out on his way out of the door, if you will. There's not too many guys your size just who, or I don't know, who are really in there anymore. I mean, do you think there's maybe a lack of big guys happening right now to where, Dijak, who's in NXT now, they're kind of making a comeback, but do you think there's maybe a lack of big guys around?
So in my opinion, all the big guys that were around got bought up by the WWE. They're all in developmental right now. Chris Hero, Dijak, Galloway, those type of big guys. Yeah. But on the indies right now, I don't see many big guys. It's me and Brody King, and we're both two extremely big athletic guys who have different things to offer, and so it's kind of I wouldn't say easy, but it makes us stand out a lot more. When we can do those athletic things, and when I can walk to the ring, and people in the crowd standing on their feet the same level as me can see how tall I actually am and how big I actually am. That's that always helps out tremendously, and so there's a lack, but I think that right now, me and Brody King are kind of holding it down pretty well for athletic big men out on the indies.
Sure, definitely. And, last but not least, I just want to get your opinion on this because, we live in a world where there's pretty much wrestling every day of the week, with WWE Monday, Tuesday, or TNA one day. But even with the network now, YouTube, Flow Slams, even, just anything and everything, even promotions all across the world have, like, their own network, if you will, or you could watch it online, watch it on your phone. Do you think it's... how do I get this out? To where I love wrestling, I'm a fan. Do you think at a certain point there's just maybe too many shows on during the week for people to consume? Or, even with you, you're a wrestler, you're on the road. Do you still watch? Do you watch whatever you can or when you can? Or there's just so much stuff to keep up with. Is it too much these days? Is it too oversaturated, if you will?
That's a hard question to ask. I think yes and no. Yes, for that. If you're looking, you're gonna find as much wrestling as you want. But I think a lot of fans right now are into the instant gratification aspect of it. It's just because of all the multimedia we have, GIFs, and the quick WWE clips that they post on YouTube and Instagram and stuff like that. So it's a lot easier to keep up with wrestling in that aspect, but if you're looking for really good quality matches, I think that it's pretty it's still pretty how do I say this? Average. You can still you can't really go and pick and choose those good quality matches. You have to kind of find them and stumble upon them. There's obviously wrestling every day. Even on the independents, there you can basically, if you really want to travel, can wrestle Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, which is unbelievable. But to get those quality matches, quality crowds, quality arenas, stuff like that. It's a little bit more hard to come by. So it's oversaturated in the fact there's a lot of wrestling, but quality of wrestling, it's still about where it needs to be, I think.
Sure. Hey, just curious from a wrestler's point of view, but hey, that's why we're here. We love wrestling. But Josh Briggs, where can people find you? Where can they see you on some shows coming up? Social media? Can you tell us anything and everything about Josh Briggs on how to find you online?
So you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at the Josh Briggs. Add me on Facebook at Josh Briggs. I post my matches and my match schedules and all that stuff for the month in a nice professional looking graphic that I take hours out of my day to create. But coming up this month, I got Eddie Edwards at Cold Fury this Friday, March 16th. March 18th, I'm at NEW, and it's me and David Starr at Beyond Wrestling as well that same day. Making my MCW debut March 14th in Maryland. I'm always up in Canada. I'm in the Midwest now for Black Label Pro and talking to some other people. So basically, if you walk outside of your house, you'll probably see me at this point.
Well, there you go. And chances are he doesn't like you. Josh Briggs, thank you so much, man. I'm sure we'll talk to you again down the road, but we appreciate you taking the time out for us today.
Of course. Thanks, man.